Captain, Voyager 6 disappeared into what they used to call a black hole.
Black hole.
The black hole? Black hole.
Black hole.
Black hole.
Black hole.
Black hole? Black hole.
A black hole?
A black hole.
Star Trek is one of the largest entertainment franchises there is, so it certainly is no surprise that it has moved onto the silver screen and remained there almost constantly for over 30 years, and will be returning yet again next year. Before this year is out, we will be covering all of them, from Gene's Star Trek the Motion Picture to Abrams' Star Trek I Have No Number or Subtitle. Numerous books and behind-the-scenes comments have been presented, much of which contradicts each other. I'll be presenting as much as I can be reasonably assured is true, but don't be surprised if you have a different source that says something contrary to what I've said. Which is the true version? Well, that's probably something we'll never know. Even while the original Star Trek was still on the air, Gene Roddenberry had talked about doing a Trek movie. And so when we finally departed with Turnabout Intruder, unfortunately, the question of what would come next included the possibility of Star Trek the movie. That was one of several attempts to bring the show back. There was an animated half-hour series that was attempted but was limited to only 22 episodes. Gene tried working on his film idea called The God Thing, which was rejected pretty much for its religious overtones, but would serve as inspiration down the line. Gene still wanted to be involved though, so other writers were brought in to assist. John D.F. Black, who had done The Naked Time, suggested an idea with a black hole, and this was well before Disney's film with Maximilian. The idea was that this black hole was being used as a garbage dump, and its unchecked growth would eventually destroy the Earth. But Paramount felt that wasn't big enough. This not big enough attitude eventually led to this apocryphal tale in which it was suggested that the Enterprise flies to the edge of the universe, blasts through, and finds God. And the executive says, "Not big enough!" Harlan Ellison, who did the much-loved City on the Edge of Forever, was also brought in and worked with Gene on the story that inspired that legend, recounted by Stephen King in one of his non-fiction books. Alien reptiles see the domination of humanity on Earth, and so go back in time to correct this so that reptiles will emerge triumphant, with various moral and ethical problems relating to our hero's involvements. It spanned all of space and all of time, too, so it was definitely big enough. It didn't pan out. It did lead to an event, though, which speaks to the soul-crushing experiences of many writers, and is quoted and misquoted. The Paramount suit that was listening to all this brought up something about the Mayan calendar coming from aliens, and so that they should maybe put some Mayans in the movie. Ellison says, "I looked at Gene, Gene looked at me. He said nothing. I looked at Trabulus and said, there weren't any Mayans at the dawn of time. And he said, well, who's to know the difference? And I said, I'm to know the difference. It's a dumb suggestion. So Trabulus got very uptight and said he liked the Mayans a lot, and why didn't I do it if I wanted to write this picture? So I said, I'm a writer. I don't know what the fuck you are. Since swearing at the bosses didn't work, the next writer was Robert Silverberg, who brought in what he called the Billion-Year Voyage, with invisible Klingons, psychic powers, and Dyson spheres involved. That didn't pan out either. I don't know whether or not it was big enough. Gene finally found what he thought was a winner with a script called Planet of the Titans. But the poor writers who were charged with it found the director, Philip Kaufman, demanding one thing and Gene demanding the other, so they finally quit in frustration and left it to the director to just write the damn script himself. Work on Planet of the Titans stopped when someone at Paramount finally said, let's make our own network and Star Trek can be the flagship show. Hey, that idea sounds familiar. It would bring back most of the original crew and be called Star Trek Phase 2. Alan Dean Foster took some elements from The God Thing to create what would be the 2-hour pilot for it, called In Thy Image. A huge ship from a race called the Wan had come on behalf of the god Ensa to purge the pollution of living things from Earth. The Wan had in fact received the Pioneer 10 probe and worshipped it as a god, misunderstanding what NASA's message was. Kirk's creativity, in the end, inspires the Wand to spare mankind so that this trait of creativity could be further studied. Well, the network deal fell through, and they were left wondering what the hell to do now. However, at the same time, Close Encounters of the Third Kind was doing quite well, and a little film called Star Wars seemed to be catching on. So they decided to go back to the movie idea, and the pilot was now going to be their first film. The concepts would then later be recycled into Star Trek The Next Generation, which shows things might have worked out for the best, because those recycled elements were responsible for much of the early silliness of TNG. This is why you suddenly see some new people with 10 times the number of lines as Chekhov and Sulu put together who will never be seen again outside this film. Star Trek I, released as Star Trek the Motion Picture, has also become known as Star Trek the Motionless Picture and Star Trek the Slow Motion Picture. You'll see why as we go on. Few things I've done have raised more ire than talking about this film. Let me therefore preface this review with some remarks. As always, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. If you like this movie, then I'm happy for you, and I mean that sincerely. If this film brings you joy, good for you. This is fine. Right up until the point someone decides, it's not enough that I like it, everyone who doesn't is wrong. Now you're just being an asshole. If you think there's a message or something in the film other people might be missing, okay. If you think the film is underappreciated, okay. If you think any of these facts makes you more intelligent, more sophisticated, or in any way better, why don't you go and inflict your personality on someone else? Comparisons are sometimes made between this film and 2001: A Space Odyssey. 2001 was, in my opinion, a work of genius. But I can certainly understand why some people just don't like it. My distinguished colleague Confused Matthew talked about his problems with the film. And while I don't agree with all of them, I would never presume that that somehow makes me a more intelligent and sophisticated person. So it boggles my mind that there are people out there who presume a similar attitude about this film entitles them to feel a sense of superiority. At least 2001 is a recognized success, with numerous awards, placement within lists of cinematic greats, and, along with the aforementioned Close Encounters and Star Wars, included in the National Film Registry for being significant. Now that may very well be what motivates some people to defend it so harshly. I don't know, and I'm not going to psychoanalyze anyone. I'm just pleased that for every person who feels the need to scream of the intellectual failure of anyone who dares to disagree with them, that I usually get two who say, I like the film anyway, and here's why, ... in a nice, polite way. I usually don't agree with them, but at least we can discuss the matter like two reasonable people and recognize we just have different points of view. Now, the ironic part of all this is that of the 10 original films, 5 are going to be above average for the group and 5 are below average, right? Of the films I've listed as below average, this is the one that I've given the top slot. And the reason it's in the bottom half and not the top is not because of the acting, the script, the ideas, the dialogue, or anything like that. It's the effects. They don't complement this film, they kill it. To give you some idea, here's a couple facts. Encounter at Farpoint has almost 20% more dialogue than Star Trek the Motion Picture, but the latter is almost 50% longer than the former. Yes, it takes almost half again to say even less than Encounter at Farpoint did. And it's not as if Encounter at Farpoint is known for its breakneck pace. They've got a scene that's 3 minutes of the Enterprise de-docking with itself. Now, I know you can't exactly measure everything based upon dialogue here, but what are the scenes that are taking up all that space, huh? How often do you see somebody just walking up a corridor, standing in a hallway, working at their station when no dialogue is taking place? And I'm including Captain's log here. Not much. It's all the effects. They're crushing the life out of this film. And I cannot understand this attitude that if it's got action, tension, adventure, then it's for the hoi polloi. But if it's got none of that, then suddenly it's art. And anyone who doesn't appreciate that is so lowbrow they're looking for pretty lasers. Well, let me point back to 2001 again to show you how that falls flat on its face, so that you can actually see it done right. There's a section, it's about 6 or 7 minutes long, of the trip from the orbiting station in that film to the lunar base. It's a scene completely free of all dialogue, and occurs, well, not too long after the same time as the Enterprise reveal shot in TMP, which runs in at 4.5 minutes from the time they stop talking until the time that they dock. Except the TMP sequence actually feels longer because the TMP one is just the ship over and over and over, and occasionally people looking at the ship, or to really shake things up, at each other. The 2001 sequence shows bits of one thing, then another thing, establishes this idea, reveals these aspects of space travel. In other words, it's given you the impressive sights, plus provides you with information through observation, and keeps the whole thing fresh. The film doesn't stop for the effects. The effects help the film move forward. And what's more, this is all new, trying to give us our first real view of what it would look like for humanity to be casual space travelers, at least in our own local neighborhood. No offense, but Star Trek with spaceships and the Enterprise, we've seen that before. Yeah, it's great that it's finally on the big screen. Yeah, it's great that it's new special effects and all of that. But do we honestly need to look at the Enterprise for nearly 5 minutes? We do have the entire rest of the movie to look at it, after all. Now let me say again, if you still like this film, if you think it's great or even the best of the lot, good for you, and I mean that. But if you seem to believe this film is some kind of litmus test of character, let me share you one other anecdote about this film from someone who commented on the film over the radio and said some kind of unkind things about it. People who liked the film decided to show how intelligent, sophisticated, and all-around better a person they were than this guy by sneaking over to his house at night when no one would see them and throwing rotten eggs at his front door. And ironically, permanently marred the hand-carved, specially made work of art on it. So much for the defenders of the arts. Okay, let's get down to the movie itself.